All right. So most of you have seen these notes in class, and but a few of you maybe were absent or you just wanted to go back and review. So we're just going to go through a few of these. So we first are going to talk about what are the factors. So we needed to remind ourselves of what factors of 12. So when you write 12, and you're trying to find the factors, it's what multiplies to get to 12. So that would be 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Now, what also is true, so a positive times a positive is a positive, but also a negative times a negative. So that means negative 12 and negative 1. Negative 2 and negative 6, and negative 3 and negative 4. So all of those are factors of 12. So now the difference between 12 and negative 12 is that one of them has to be negative, because a negative times a positive is a negative. So it could be negative 1 and 12, but it also could be 1 and negative 12. Whoops. It could be negative 2 and 6 or 2 and negative 6. 3 and negative 4 or negative 3 and 4. So those are all the factors of 12 and negative 12. I'm going to skip those two. What are two numbers that multiply to 20 and add to 12? So now we need to find the factors of 20. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. And now we have to add to 12. So this gives me 21. Here we go. So that means my factors that I'm looking for are 2 and 10. Two numbers that multiply to negative 6. So that means they have to, one of them has to be negative. So negative 1 and 6, 1 and negative 6, 2 and negative 3, and negative 2 and 3. So to add to negative 5, let's just do simple math here. We add, there we go. So you could have stopped right there. So your answer would be 1 and negative 6. So when you're given something that you need to multiply and add to, you got to find all the factors and then add up all the factors and see which one works. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put that into a diamond. So this is what the diamond is, and I'm actually going to make it into an X, but we're going to call it a diamond. So at the top, that's the number that you need to multiply by. The bottom, that's the number you need to add to. And then these are your two factors that you're looking for. So like the last problem, we were looking for two numbers. So this one would be 1 and negative 6. And you were looking to add to negative 5 and multiply to negative 6. So that's how the diamond would look. So now I'm going to give you some. So here I'm going to give you the left and the right, and you need to come up with the top and bottom. So we multiply to find our top. Let's do a different color here. Let's do purple. Okay, so 5 times 7 is 35, and that's the top. 5 plus 7 is 12, and that goes on the bottom. All right, so I want you to multiply these two to get to the top, add those two to get to the bottom. So I want to see if you guys can do the next two. So pause it, and then we will talk about it. See if you got the same answer as me. All right, so those are my answers. 3 times negative 6 is negative 18. 3 times plus negative 6 is negative 3. Negative 1 times 8 is negative 8. Negative 1 plus 8 is 7. Okay, so now here's the trickier ones. So you are given the top and bottom, and you need to come up with the two sides. So we need to find the factors of 9. So 1 and 9 and 3 and 3. Well, 3 and 3 we know add up to 6. So these sides are going to be 3 and 3 because the first one adds up to 10. The next one adds up to 6. Now 28. 1 and 28. 2 and 14. 4 and 7. And there we go. Now, if you already knew it was 4 and 7, you don't need to write it all down. That's fine. Sometimes, though, you get ones where you're really stuck and you just need to write them more down. Like there's a negative, and you need to add them up to a positive. So when you multiply to a negative, that means one are negative. And then if it adds to a positive, that means the bigger number is going to be positive. So negative 18 is negative 1 and 18, negative 2 and 9, negative 3 and 6. So when I add, I get 17, 7, and 3. So here is, I guess I could circle the ones we're using. So this is negative 3 and 6. Now you could have switched those two. It does not matter which one goes on left and which one goes on right. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to see if you can do these three. I will pause it, I think. Maybe not. I'll just do them then. So you can pause your end. Apparently I can't pause mine. So when you are multiplying for a positive and adding to a negative, that means they both have to be negative. So if you look here, negative 8 times negative 2 multiply to a positive 16, but they add to a negative 10. Negative 6 and negative 4 multiply to a negative or a positive 24, but then they add to a negative 10. So sometimes you got to think a little about how we get a positive number multiplied wise, which is positive times a positive, but it also could be a negative times a negative. So just a little tricky sometimes. Okay. Now we have a couple harder ones. So they have to add up to 0. So if you have a negative 100 and it's adding to a 0. So 100 is 10 times 10. So if it's a negative 100, we have a negative 10 and a positive 10. Well, that adds to a 0. Same thing here. So here we have 6 times 6 is 36, but negative 6 times positive 6 is a negative 36, and that adds to a 0 as well. Now we get into variables, and this is what we're going to be using next week. So now we have to think about what times what gives you x squared. And so this should be, well, I don't want that. Okay, so drawing, there we go. So I want this to be 2. Sorry. So now if I have, so let me just rewrite this as 2x, and I'll just get rid of all of this. Okay. So now what times what gives you x squared? Well, x times x gives you x squared. When you get x times x, you add x to x plus x, and it gives you 2x. So in this case, your two sides are going to be x and x. So it's a little bit trickier. Sometimes Cami just does not like me. Okay. Now we have these. So you have to, and these are not right. So let me do, this is 5x. Okay. So these will be right on your homework, I promise, and you won't have to do this. But think about, so 4x squared. So let's think about the 4 and then let's think about the 2. So we know that x has to be x times x. There is no way else to get x squared. Okay? So now we have to think about the 4. The 4 is 1 times 4 or 2 times 2. Well, this adds to a 4 and this adds to a 5. Well, if we want a 5, that means we need 1x and 4x. Now, if you knew 1x is the same as x, then we're good. You didn't need to write the 1. It's not wrong if you put the 1, but we don't need it. Okay, so now this one is right. So if I look at x squared and then I want it to add to an x, so that means that they both have to have an x in them. Now I look at the 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and then 3 and 4. Well, some of you already jumped to, well, obviously it has to be 3 and 4 because that adds to a 7. So 3x and 4x. They multiply to 12x squared and they add to 7x. Okay, so now this one is a little bit trickier because we have our x and y. So think about it. X, what times what gives you x squared? We've done it a few times. You know that x times x gives you x squared. Also, what times what gives you y squared? Well, that's the same principle, same thing. It has to be y times y. So that means xy and xy, they add, and it could give you an xy. So that is our variables. Now I look at -6. So -6 could be -1 and 6. It could be 1 and -6. It could be 2 and -3, or it could be -2 and 3. So there are the 4 options. So we want to add to 1. Well, some of you are already jumping down here. If you needed to add them up every single one, that is totally fine. And you see that the bottom one is the only one to add to 1. So here's the -2. There's the +3. So these ones are a little bit trickier, but not bad because